Hey, Bayside small groups, it's Easter week. Glad you've gathered. Two quick things. Number one is this. This Easter, we're doing some things we've never done. We've got two sets of services. One set here, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday night, with Kurt and I preaching on evidence for the resurrection, and then a whole different thing at the mall with Francis Chan, Lincoln, we're all up there, and it's for the entire community. And I would say this, you can bring anybody you want to any service. I know a ton of people are actually going to both and bringing people to both. And so my advice is, go after it, serve God, pray for people, and go after it, okay? Second thing I want to say is this. There are some very powerful things that happened on Easter week, and including around here, okay? And one of them was your message this weekend, Bryce, was incredible. And what I wanted to do is follow up Bryce's message with a mini interview with Bryce, going to those of you that are small group leaders and in small groups, sort of an add-on to some of the stuff you've heard, and a lot of it focuses on family, okay? So we're gonna do a little bit of, question and answer on sort of family, because you have a family unlike anything I've heard. We just got some very, very disturbing news about the state of California. And we just discovered the state of California is now leading America, which by the way leads the world. The state of California is leading America in divorces. Somebody told me right now 3 out of every 4 marriages in California end up in divorce court. 3 out of 4. I actually didn't believe it. I actually had somebody go and check the facts, and what I discovered is it's actually 76%. And we've got a guy here, Bryce Jessup. You come from a family where that really hasn't been the case, which in this state is unusual. Take a minute and describe your family. It goes back generations of marriages.
My great-grandparents stayed together. My wife's great-grandparents stayed together. Her parents and my parents stayed together. Mine for 68 years, hers for 73 years. In fact, her parents and my parents knew each other before each of them married way back in the 20s at Northwest Christian College. So when I was ready to get married, I almost didn't have any choice because my wife kept telling me, you marry that woman. And finally I said to her, honey, if I want to marry her, I'll marry her. If I don't want to marry her, I won't marry her. Now get off my back. And I married her. She's been a sweetheart. And we've been married now for 58 years.
58 years.
58 years. I suppose, Ray, a number of things just kind of off the top of my head is divorce for us was never an option. In other words, when we knew that we entered into that relationship, it was going to be tough, it was going to be challenging. We never considered divorce, ever, ever, ever. There were times when it was tough. All marriages are going through tough challenges. But one thing that we decided on early on is
so in a sense, you're saying number one is, the only great foundation is divorce is not an option.
Not an option. Okay. Not an option. If God brought us together, He can keep us together if we will trust Him. My dad, I can remember, in fact, the very last words that he spoke before he went on to glory was, there isn't any problem that a man and a woman committed to Jesus Christ and committed to each other will not be able to solve if they came to the foot of the cross and bowed and gave themselves afresh to Him. And then Dad died and went on to glory. So that was the passion of his life, that there was going to be that kind of commitment and power available to follow it through. And so I suppose the other thing, secondly, would be that we decided to make our relationship the top priority with God overall. That if my schedule got too busy, I was not going to let it deteriorate my relationship with my wife. I would have to say no to things that would cause that to happen in terms of schedule. And that was not an easy thing. And it was a struggle thing in earlier years because I tended to overcommit myself to outside activities. But I decided that we had to work that through and make the marriage a priority. Those two things would be two of the most powerful, I think, components. The third one would be prayer together. Because of our schedules, much like yours, I'm sure it's hard to find time to spend together for prayer time. We set aside every Saturday morning for about an hour and a half to pray for our family and then everything beyond that. That became a real connecting time for us. And unless I was out of town, every Saturday morning at 8 o'clock, we were there at the kitchen table and we were entering into a time of prayer. We did that with our kids also.
So even when your kids are at home, you gathered around the table on Saturday morning at 8 o'clock?
Exactly. And we did it lots of times.
And I needed a crowbar to pry mine out of bed. So that's cool.
But we would, during the week, have devotions in the evening. I always took my phone off the hook. Those were the days when we used telephones rather than cell phones. And I'd take it off the hook because people knew I was at home. And we would spend time pulling verses of Scripture out of a little place that we had on the table there. And the kids would read it and then try to describe it. And then we would pray for each other so that there was prayer that permeated not only my wife and I, but down through our children also. Because one of the things that sometimes can aggravate a relationship is when your children go awry. And if you can get them praying along with mom and dad, it does an awful lot to help secure their relationship with the Lord and with you and dad.
How many kids, there's some benefits to making these kind of, it's almost like the right road is never the easy road, but it's usually the best road for a long term. How many kids and grandkids do you have?
We have 3 kids, we have 7 grandkids, and we have 4 great-grandkids. And right now that makes a total of 26 people in our family, counting the grandkids that have married and those that are on the edge of getting married at this point. Yeah.
And if you look at your family tree, how many of these folks are walking with God?
All of them are walking with God except for 2 of them. One of the grandsons and his wife, they're very, very fine people. They went through a time of real reaction and walking away, but they have maintained relationships with us. And what I'm grateful for is that they let us love on them.
Yep.
In fact, one of them, the one that I'm describing, just texted me this afternoon and said that he had read 1/4 of my book. And I said, yay, God, way to go. Because that is
cool.
a strong testimony of God's faithfulness. And he's actually going to be graduating from WJU next year. He's a vet and he got Yellow Ribbon program and they're free and so forth.
That's cool. I got one last question, and the last question is this. There are a lot of people watching this, a lot of you watching this are going, man, I have gotten this all wrong, okay? Didn't do devotions, didn't do this, didn't, a list of things, or some people are watching this, they've gotten divorced, and now they're sort of feeling worse. What would you say to a person who is listening to you and going, man, I want to get this right in the future, but I've got it wrong? If you could speak to them for 1 minute, what would you tell them?
I would tell them that you have the opportunity for a new beginning. That God gives to all of us if we want to accept it, the opportunity to make the future different from the past. Sometimes our past, we're not the blame for it. Sometimes we are the blame for it. But our future, we only have ourselves to blame. You can make choices to shape out a very different future than the past that was handed to you. Otherwise, Christ is irrelevant to our journey. And so I would say, decide before the Lord just to give it all to Him. Give everything to Him on your knees with your spouse. Open up your hearts, be honest before Him, and be honest with one another and say, babe, let's start over. Let's be committed to it. Let's talk daily about what that means and what it looks like. And you can turn that around. I've seen couples do it. I've helped couples do it. It is possible by God's grace. If they don't live selfishly. If they live selfishly and want to build their own little private kingdoms and do their own things, it'll destroy it.
You bet.
That's just the way it is.
You bet. Got one last question. I'm gonna pile on some last questions here. Got one last question. We have people in small groups that are watching this. Some heard you this weekend, but a whole bunch of them didn't hear you this weekend. And some folks will see this later. I love when families build in traditions. Because I grew up in a family a million miles away from God. They ended up divorced. I mean, by and large, my family traditions don't involve anything except alcohol and screaming, okay? So my wife and I sort of had to figure out, okay, how do we build our own family traditions, okay? You've built one that you've used with your anniversaries where you take your families away. You described a little bit of that this weekend. Would you describe that in detail? Everybody watching this in small groups, I want them to go, oh, wouldn't it be great if we built some things like that?
Yeah. We decided on our 50th wedding anniversary that we would take all of our family members on a Caribbean cruise. And it was a fantastic time, just letting them do everything they wanted to during the days, but then getting together at night and loving on them, playing games, and all of us together celebrating and having fun. And we played a lot of games and so forth. Had an awards ceremony on our 55th anniversary. We did the same thing and had an Olympic awards ceremony where we handed out gold medals to all of the family members for some great achievement, whether they ate more crawfish than anybody else or steak, or one of our grandsons, he chased more gals around the deck than any other, that kind of thing. And we had fun, but then I blessed them and had prayer for them and let them know they were the most important people in my wife and I's life. And we meant it, that this is where our priority is. And I think that that has value in building trust and depth of relationships. We are blessed, Ray, with something too that is kind of unusual. All of our 26 family members live within 30 minutes of our house.
Wow.
And frequently they live a long ways away. It's hard to get together. So in terms of tradition, next Sunday on Easter, we will have them all over to our house. They're already making all the arrangements. My wife and I have decided that if they want to come, the house is theirs. They've got to do all the work. We clean it up and get it ready, and then they put on the meals and everything. And we have a time of prayer and a time of celebration. And so we do a number of those kinds of things throughout the year. Thanksgiving time, Christmas time, Easter time, and then the cruises that we have taken, and so forth.
Here's what I want to say. Those of you that are in small groups, those of you that watch in small groups, a paraphrase of great words: what does it profit a man or a woman if they gain the entire world and lose their family? Yeah. God's got better days ahead if you'll go to the cross and trust Him. We hope this is a benefit and kind of an add-on for you small groups for some of the stuff you're going to be talking about. But we really believe there is incredible power in putting your family first, putting God first, and staying at the cross and receiving new beginnings and actually giving each other new beginnings too. God bless you all. Have a great week. And Bryce, thank you very much.